how it all went south.
In 1989, a man named Alexi Indris-Santana was accepted to the prestigious Princeton University based on not only his intellect, but also his incredible backstory of being a self-educated ranch hand with a 1410 SAT score. The school was so taken with Santana that they agreed to defer his enrollment 1 year so that he could care for his sick mother. The catch? The man wasn't caring for anyone. He was in prison. And his name was not Alexi Santana. It was James Arthur Hogue, a master con man who had fooled even the brightest minds at Princeton. It would be years before anyone knew Hogue's real identity, and his past full of lies and deception was unraveled. Even then, it was all by chance. This is the story of James Hogue, the incredible con man of Princeton. I'm Sean Kipe with Jason Hoke, and this is how it all went south. In March of 1988, a man using the name Alexi Santana was arrested in St. George, Utah, when a storage unit he was living out of at the time was searched by a detective. That detective, Matt Jacobson, was following a lead related to over $20,000 in stolen bicycle frames and parts from a San Marcos, California bicycle maker. Are you following that?
I'm not. Yeah, so far the Princeton connection is not hit.
No,
it's a storage unit in Utah with bicycle parts. There's a big disconnect, but I'm sure you'll bring it back together.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it back together. This story, I think it's almost more interesting to tell this story, or it makes more sense rather to sort of tell it backwards.
Right.
Because, you know, as you already know, I mean, he's a con man, and this guy, when a con man is a good con man, the sort of web of lies as they get picked apart, it's not just one situation, it's many. And that's true with this guy. And I thought, you know, I have to kind of tell it backwards.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. In October, but so if you're not clear, this guy's living in Utah, in St. George, Utah, living in a storage unit. And a detective knocks on the storage unit, finds him in there with $20,000 worth of bicycle parts. And that is because, and he's with the guy who rightfully owns the parts, who owns a, boutique, but he makes boutique bicycles in California. So gets this knock on the door of his storage unit. The cop opens it up. There's a guy sleeping, with 20 grand worth of bicycles.
He's like, how'd you find me? It says Unit 2A, right?
Yeah. In October of 1987, the owner of that shop where the bicycles were stolen, Dave Tesh, walked into the shop to find that overnight, a thief had knocked over a rooftop vent and climbed down to loot his business. Tesh thought that a competitor had committed the crime. This is until a friend of his from Utah told him that while at a party, a man had shown him a bike caliper engraved with Tesh's name. He told him the man at the party was named James Hogue. So really a random, he gets knocked over, gets his shop knocked over, thinks it's got to be one of these competitors, of mine. Because I'm doing, this guy's doing well. Buddy of his randomly speaking to.
It's always the weird domino that falls.
Yeah.
It's not the burning bush in the corner or the hot sunlight in the desert. It's always something random like this.
Weird. Yeah. Hey, and the guy, he makes these things. So he etches his name onto the parts. It's his, and his buddy just says, hey, yeah, I was at a party and some guy showed me a thing. And he's like, who is it? This is my shop was knocked over. Tesh knew exactly who Hogue was when his friend said the name. He had employed him for a while to help out at the shop. I worked there with him for several months. The two had met at a cross-training camp in Vail, Colorado, where they were both instructors. But Tesh knew Hogue as Alexi Santana, a Stanford professor with a PhD in bioengineering, not as James Hogue, who lived in a storage unit in Utah. The detective also found in that storage unit several competitive running trophies, all with different names on them and all for 18-year-old boys. Also found, yeah. Also found were numerous papers and documents along with the sleeping bag.
Well, he really got away with it, didn't he? He almost got away with having trophies and sleeping bags, and no one would have ever caught him. I mean, he was that close to millions.
But you only know a fraction of
I know.
This story is not, I'll tell you, it's not one. Most times con men and people who are, these elaborate con artists, it's about money and it's about, pulling the wool over someone's eyes and in order to get some big financial gain. And it's not the case here. I'll tell you that right off the bat. This guy was not seeking to become rich. So you tell me why you think he did it after you hear this story.
Is there another reason you should do this besides being rich, or is it?
Well, that's part of the. I'm going to pose that question to you sort of at the end of this, because after you hear everything, it gets so much weirder. Yeah.
Maybe there's a motive, maybe there's not, and maybe we'll never know. But yes, please hold that till the end.
Hogue was arrested. Also, among the files Detective Johnson found in the storage unit were several admission letters to various Ivy League schools like Princeton, Brown, and Stanford. He called Stanford to let them know that Hogue was claiming to be a professor there, but apparently did not call all of those other schools. Hogue received a 5-year sentence and served only 10 months. While in prison in Utah for the bike theft, Hogue received word from Princeton that he was one of the roughly 1,200 applicants out of over 14,000 that had been accepted to the next year's class. And it's not clear, and I looked and I couldn't find how he was communicating with Princeton, because if the return address was like cell block D, that kind of would have killed it right there. So I don't know if I can only assume maybe he had a friend that he was forwarding the mail to the friend from the prison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Still out of state tuition if you're living in a storage box in Utah.
No, full ride.
Full ride. Okay. Well, okay. Benefits.
Yeah. Yeah, but I couldn't find that, because that was the one thing that stood out to me. It was like, well, how is he? Because he was communicating back to them.
And every time you do, like, it may seem like a simple thing, but like for him to architect that could have taken 25 steps to get that.
Yeah.
Like you said, to be able to have it happen and also have it feel credible.
Well, yeah. And I mean, when you hear the rest of this, I mean, at this point that he's been accepted. And out of 14,000 people, only 1,200 are accepted to that year's class, and he's one of them.
Yeah.
It's not just on his merit. As I told you before, it's his backstory. I'll tell you about the backstory when we come back, and we'll find out how James Hogue went from prison to Princeton. So we're talking about James Arthur Hogue, con man extraordinaire, who is now currently in prison and has found out somehow, however he's communicating with the people at Princeton, that he's been accepted. You have no idea where this story is going, and it's already, we've learned that in the storage unit he was arrested in, he's got running trophies and just in random names, and it's kind of a mishmash.
Yes.
Yeah. Before James Hogue was arrested for that theft in Utah, he had an in-person interview at Princeton. So he actually did go through that step. It wasn't all by paper. So they've met him. Now in prison, they had accepted him. Hogue wrote a letter to the admissions board asking to defer his enrollment until the next year, as he said he'd be caring for his sick mother in Switzerland who was dying of cancer. And Princeton agreed to that. Pretty good reasoning.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's so that he could finish his prison sentence. Once he got out of prison, Hogue started his freshman semester at Princeton enrolled as Alexi Indris-Santana. That is the name that's who they think he is. They have no idea who James Hogue even is. His accolades and stats as a competitive runner provided in his admission letter caused a lot of attention at the school because and that's what he got his full ride there, basically. So, I mean, it was I don't want to say full ride because he still had some tuition that, financial aid and scholarships and all that kind of stuff.
There's a great new video making the rounds from Malcolm Gladwell about how to get into Harvard.
Yeah.
And it's really awesome. And he says there's 3 ways to get into Harvard because, like Princeton, there's about 1,200 to 1,400, lots more applicants than actual spots. And he says there's 3 things. One is money. So if you have especially a rich father and you can plan on donating somewhere around $20 million, you're in.
Wow.
So that's just the money. 2 is if you're a legacy.
Right, yeah.
And he points out the fact that there's a lot of people that have actually worked in the admissions office before that then are alumni and they get kids of their own and they know the ways in. And the 3rd is actually sports. And he said that, and I never thought of this, but like there's all kinds of not mainstream sports.
Yeah, it's not the Harvard football team that you're
right.
Water polo.
They have more
whatever
sports than anything like than a Big Ten school would have, right? And so that's your way in is through sports and athletics, and it's it could be fencing or it could be like running is maybe where you're leading with this.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what's crazy is my freshman year at University of Wisconsin, they canceled a bunch of sports, including the baseball team, and the baseball team did not exist at the University of Wisconsin. I think it just came back this last year. So
why? Just because it was no good, just didn't have a good team.
They didn't have the budget back then, and and now it's all supported. Most college athletics are supported by football and basketball and the TV deals. That's essentially where all the money comes from. Mm. How do you split that up? And so they're able to have more programs now because the money's so huge. I distract, I know, but like when you said Princeton and running, it made me think of what Malcolm Gladwell said. Like, what are the 3 key ways in to be one of those 12 to 1,400 that make it in each year?
Yeah.
Donation/money, legacy, and sports.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And there's one more thing I think that will help you. I mean, and like genuinely, and this actually comes up in the case of like when they were trying to figure out how this guy did this. Anyway, his accolades and stats as a competitive runner provided in his admission letter caused a lot of attention at the school. As I said, before he even arrived, he'd been asked for an interview several times by the school paper and even local papers in town. His stats and just everything that he had won long distance running was his thing. And, they wanted to know who this guy was that was a ranch hand who scored a 1,400 plus on his SATs, gets admitted to Princeton, and can run a 4-minute mile.
Right. It's so unbelievable that you would never check.
Yeah, it's just he's completely self-taught.
Because who makes up stuff like that? Therefore, we should never check.
Yeah, didn't have a father, caring for his sick mother in Switzerland.
Right.
I mean, it's really is a story, and that's one of the things that I learned also was from this story was schools like that do like the backstory. People like this who it's unconventional. It's not the legacy. It's
a narrative, right?
Yeah.
It's like when we watch the Olympics, like we see the competitions, but there's always these narrative stories of the background of the, the incredible places they came from. Let me ask you a question. Do you think you could make up a story like this? Like if you went home and you had a week to come up with like your own backstory and make something up that's really crazy, you think you could do it and make it believable?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. To like get into a school like Harvard. I mean, I probably, but I think it's one thing to make up a crazy story about your life. It's another to sell it,
right?
or to sell. It's one thing to sell it on paper,
right?
But then if you meet the people and you have to
have a straight face. You have to, you
have to know the answers to questions.
Yeah, you can't be a dummy. You got to fit in.
No, and this guy was very intelligent. I mean, he is. I mean, he's alive, but yeah, you can't, even if you make up a story like this, like you've got to be able to sell it 24/7.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, and this was actually pointed out by some of the investigators, is that, the name Santana, it implies some, ethnicity that's a minority, and it's like that also is on the radar of a school, It kind of starts marking off it's all these check marks for this guy. Santana became an exemplary student, taking 6 to 7 courses per semester, receiving mostly straight A's at Princeton. That's impressive. They're not easy courses, right?
There's a little bit of the hardest part of getting into Harvard and Princeton is getting it, or being successful is actually getting in. Like I think a lot of A's are given out at these, but you still have to go. You still have to take the tests.
It wasn't like that when I was in Harvard.
Yeah.
I had to work for my A's. But he received mostly straight A's. He was in the school's prestigious dining club, the Ivy, and was excelling on their track team, scoring more awards and trophies. And this is a guy who, according to friends and roommates of his in college, would read Plato and books on quantum physics for fun. I mean, so he fit in. He was kind of
So was he a good runner then?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, very good runner.
So that was believable.
Yeah, no,
that wasn't fake.
Not made up. He was
interesting.
He was a good runner.
Could he beat me?
I don't know. Can you run a 4-minute mile?
No.
He could beat you.
Okay.
But he was also a distance runner, apparently. That I don't want to give it away yet. There's some more coming, but on the point of how good of a runner he was, I'll get into that a little bit. He was well liked overall, although not particularly popular. He kept to himself and rarely made eye contact with anyone that he spoke to. Some did find Santana a bit odd in the way that he never wanted to be in the limelight when he won a race, even. Often not even standing on the podium afterwards, and rarely gave post-race interviews. Now, this is somebody who that's your ride into Princeton. And most people who've worked to get there, they want to bask in the glory of winning a race.
Right.
And this guy didn't, and wouldn't talk about himself or give many interviews. And when he did, it was usually fairly vague. So that started to stand out to people. Also, the fact that he rarely ever made eye contact with even, his roommates, his close friends. It just kind of started to be like a little weird, and you can only for so long go, all right, well, he's just shy, or he's
loner or whatever.
He's a loner or whatever. It just started to sound a little odd. Then in 1991, at a Harvard-Yale Princeton track meet, a Yale senior named Rene Pacheco recognized Santana from Palo Alto High School back in 1985. Only his name in 1985 wasn't Alexi Santana or James Hogue. Back then, it was J. Mitchell Huntsman. Hogue, there's so many names at this point. James Hogue, at 26 years old, had enrolled at Palo Alto High School as 16-year-old track star J. Mitchell Huntsman. He often destroyed his competition at events, and many believed this boy would surely go to the Olympics. The young boy also had an incredible backstory, just like Santana did. He said he was orphaned after his parents were killed in a car accident in Bolivia. Saying he was originally from San Diego, he was homeschooled and mostly self-taught, again, very much like Santana. After Huntsman dominated one race, he quickly left the field without approaching the officials' table, which was suspicious.
Yeah.
The principal, by that point, had also started to, say he looks a little old to be a 16-year-old, but, okay. Something about Jay Huntsman also didn't sit well with a reporter for the Peninsula Times-Tribune, a Palo Alto newspaper. He began to dig into the young man's past. And when we come back, we'll find out the shocking information that reporter learned. And it is kind of one for the books when you talk about learning something about another person that you start to dig into and you get this aha moment. So we'll talk about it when we come back. Where's your head now in this story that you've learned that this same man has now two different identities that are not his and enrolled in high school as a competitive track star at 26 years old?
Yeah, he's doing all those things, right? Even the name, is it J. Mitchell Huntsman?
Yeah.
Sounds like he should be in a model for a polo ad or something.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like he's trying to fit into something more sophisticated. And I mean, Palo Alto High School, Palo Alto is where Facebook is and, kind of modern day Silicon Valley and all that stuff. And so he's running in, both whether he's in Princeton or whether he's on the other coast, he's running with some pretty big deal crowds.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to keep up with. So, like, it feels to me like, how long can he keep up the ruse? Not just, one is just being caught, but two, like, how can he, be there and do all the things that any of that crowd would do? So he's got a couple things working against him. Luckily the internet wasn't really a thing back then. So 91, whatever the time frame that is, he'd easily be busted these days for something. Like, so he's on the cusp of that last era of being a con artist that, like,
catch me if you can.
Yeah, like, his protection is don't take a photo of me because it might show up somewhere. Like that.
But he did, though. He was in school papers and even college, he was in newspapers winning races and
it's interesting to me that Peninsula, what is it? The
Peninsula Times-Tribune, I think.
Yeah, like, not the biggest paper in the world. Like, someone.
Yeah, and I think they do a lot with this, they're covering.
Someone sniffs something. Like, that's.
Yeah, the reporter.
That's like, that's like local news, like hardcore journalists at their best. They're not trying to win a Pulitzer, or they're not trying to, work for the New York Times or anything.
Something's weird.
Yeah, something's weird, and like, hey, I'm just going to pursue it.
So the reporter for that paper, Jason Cole, called the Office of Public Records in San Diego asking if they had a birth certificate on record for J. Mitchell Huntsman, which is, he said he was from San Diego originally. That's where he was born. To his surprise, they did, but he learned that not only were Huntsman's parents alive and well, but Jay Huntsman had also died 2 days after his birth of pneumonia in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
Hogue was confronted and fessed up, giving his real name, and then skipped town, disappeared from Palo Alto. He, got it off of it was a gravestone, I think is where I read that he got.
Honestly, that's the Jack Barsky story.
Yeah.
That's
right.
The KGB agent. I spent 1.5 years with him. We made the podcast, The Agent, about his life. He comes over from.
Nice plug.
Yep, exactly. Downloads are flowing. He shows up, and one of the other agents goes to the cemetery and finds a little boy who's died early in life, and no one's thinking about this years later.
Yeah.
Until they come back years later.
Why would you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But so they confront him, and he fesses up, "This is my name," and then just gone.
I have to say, we were talking about the reporter.
Yeah.
To be able to make a call, I'm really impressed.
It's impressive.
To make a call down to San Diego asking for someone's records like that, does that even happen? That's real. I'm impressed.
Well, yeah. It was probably 15 years, 69 to 85.
Yeah.
So, wasn't that long, and everything then was paper, so it would have been in a file. So you even get lucky for them having it on file.
Right.
But there was some luck involved with him just being able to make that call and get those records, and then I guess do some research and find, it's crazy, and that just that one phone call blew the whole story apart.
Can you imagine being that reporter and being like, what?
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. That moment.
Yeah. That's an aha moment.
Yeah.
So back to 1991, at the Princeton track meet, Renee Pacheco was a former classmate in Palo Alto of Jay Huntsman and recognized Hogue and immediately went to, she called that reporter, Jason Cole, because she's like, you're not going to believe this. She was, she was there in Palo Alto when that was, everybody knew his name. Everybody knew what had happened. It was in the paper. That this guy was enrolled as a 26-year-old man, enrolled in high school. I mean, as
and now she's run into him.
Yeah, and she went to school with him, Jay Huntsman. It's hard to keep all these
Mitchell
names
Huntsman.
straight. Yeah. So now she's at this just by chance, goes to see a friend of hers at this track meet and sees him and is like, oh my God, that's James Hogue. And he's using this name Alexi Santana now. So can you imagine that? So she calls Jason Cole, the reporter who busted him, and goes to Princeton officials telling them who Alexi Santana really is. They pulled Santana's Princeton file with all his admission applicant. They start going through everything. And with Cole's previous reporting, which she also turned him on to talk to this guy because he busted him, they quickly concluded that he had fooled them and lied on his admission paperwork. All of those things started unraveling. And can you imagine? I wish, not that it's in any way acceptable for this guy to do this, but can you imagine being in the room of Princeton officials when they look up at each other after reading all this stuff and realize that they really were just duped?
Yeah.
And the guy had been in prison, and there's no sick mother in Switzerland that he's caring for. I mean, just, he wasn't a ranch hand that taught himself and all it's
a lot of backstory.
It's a lot of backstory. And can you imagine
I actually already forgot about the ranch hand part of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's, right.
And the storage unit and all that stuff. It's
so bizarre. It's all over the place. I mean, and I think that's part of what makes it work.
Yeah.
Or what made it work then is there was so much and there were so many little pieces that when you tell people this, it's overwhelming of, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you're really athletic and you're this track star. So it's you're impressive in that.
Therefore,
respect.
It must be true. It's just in your brain. We're not skeptics about a lot of things when it just seems normal. It seems right. Here's an opportunity. Here's a case where it's well, wait, you are a track star and you did this and all these things. I can believe that.
And your natural inclination is your natural instinct is not to not believe someone is capable of doing, if you tell me things about your past before I knew you, I'm not going to check into, no matter how crazy you worked at WWE, you got to hang out with such and such wrestler. Why would I not believe that?
Yeah.
Well, on February 26, 1991, Hogue was arrested while attending class and charged with forgery, theft, and falsifying records. He also pled guilty to theft from taking over $22,000 in financial aid and was sentenced to 9 months in prison, of which he only served 134 days before being paroled. And it doesn't end there.
And by the way, here we go again. You're
and he's always out of prison quickly.
Always out of prison.
5-year sentence. Quickly. He did 10 months.
Yep.
Now he's got 9 months and 130.
We got people. Months. We get people putting wood chippers and they get out quickly, and this seems so much less, right? And you're out of there in a couple 100 days or whatever.
Yeah, Hogue's criminal career did not stop there. In 1992, he worked at the Harvard Mineralogical Museum for several months and was arrested in 1993 after the museum found that Hogue had stolen over $50,000 worth of minerals, specimens, gems, and microscopes and other equipment. He was arrested and charged with grand larceny. Over $50,000 worth of stuff in a couple months. He's just pilfering.
Interesting that he jumped from Princeton to Harvard too.
Well, it was the museum. He didn't.
But still,
In 1996, he violated his parole by attending social functions and eating in the cafeteria at Princeton. Just can't stay away. In 2006, he was arrested for stealing over 7,000 items totaling over $100,000 from nearby homes where Hogue worked as a repairman in Telluride, Colorado. This is where, and it just continues on. Like, earlier in the episode, you were asking about motive.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that. And so as I go through these, I want you to think more about motive, because it seems to me the guy can't help himself.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, $100,000 worth of stuff, but he's not, with his intelligence, you would think he could go rob a bank. He could go try to fool a casino.
Wire fraud or
something.
Life insurance policy. Yeah.
Right. He could probably make a lot more money. He's amassing, he's got $150,000 all in worth of stuff that he's stolen, but a lot of it gets returned when he gets caught.
And another interesting point is, how many of the cases we've covered recently where we're like, okay, dumb criminal move.
Yeah.
This guy's pretty smart.
Oh, he's very smart.
Like usually you're like, you don't take a life insurance policy out on, the cousin who you're going to whack 60 days later. And you don't keep calling the insurance company over and over because you want the money. Like this one.
He's picking up little, a saw. And this is literally over 7,000 individual items. This is just one time that he was arrested. And it's like a circular saw and a whatever, just from construction sites. 7,000 things that you've stolen without getting caught. There's skill in what this guy is doing.
So is the motive just because it's there? Maybe you'll tell me, but like, is the motive, like, I did it because it was there?
That I don't know. In 1997, he was arrested for stealing a bicycle, and in 1998 for stealing from a grocery store. In 2016, this is where I really picked up on it. He was arrested in Aspen, Colorado, after officers found a makeshift shack on the side of the mountain where Hogue was living. When they approached the shack, he fled out a back window. Once inside, they found that he'd been stealing goods from around town and selling them on eBay, totaling over $70,000. And they also found $17,000 cash in his vehicle when he was arrested, along with thousands of dollars in stolen goods. And it's like, in his car, I think there was like a mink coat or something. I mean, it's just, Aspen.
Oh, I've been there.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
It's, I don't think there's a house in Aspen that's less than $1 million. And that's being generous. Yes. So he goes there because he knows that, he can steal
Aspen,
things.
Telluride, Stanford, Princeton, Harvard. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He can fit in.
He can fit in, and he's intelligent.
Yeah.
But he's just stealing and stealing and stealing. And it's, part of me was like, hey, look, if you've got to steal to survive and live or whatever, all right, you can make an argument for that once or twice, right? If someone has to do what they have to do to live. But he's got $17,000 in cash in his car. He's homeless by choice. I mean, he's built this shack on the side of a mountain and camouflaged it. And it was very, it was well constructed. He lived there for 1 to 2 years. And there was, he had it set up with shelving and satellite radio. And there, he's not doing this because he has no other choice. He was living this way by choice. If you have $17,000 in cash, you've sold over $70,000 worth of stuff on eBay since the last time you got caught with $100,000 worth of stuff of merchandise that's been stolen. You could rent a place. You could get cleaned up. You could get a job.
Yeah. He's
chosen not to. Well, Why?
We have weird intersections with our episodes. If you remember the Friendly Murders, where our good pal Andreas Christensen had a cave.
Yeah.
And all the munitions and firearms and stuff in the middle of nowhere in a cave. It's so strange, right?
Well, it's interesting that, the guy who is very bright, very intelligent, and honestly a self-starter. I mean, you think about it. he's applying himself just in the wrong ways.
Yeah.
You know, why would you choose to?
What's also interesting to me is, you started this story, what, like 91-ish or so? Isn't that kind of where?
Well, it falls apart in 90, it starts falling apart for real in 91, but
I mean, like you just gave me a date of
85.
like 2017.
Yeah,
I mean, like I thought
yeah.
this was like, hey, this
This
is
is his life.
this is the story from the 90s that you've never heard. It's like,
Mm-mm.
yes, but this keeps going, and it's actually not that old of a story, right?
No, it gets more recent. At his sentencing for those crimes, the judge said, "Mr. Hogue, you are without a doubt a very good thief, but you're a terrible criminal because you always get caught." He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but again was paroled in 2019. Just we'll catch you again. We'll see you again.
Yeah, that's right.
In 2021, at the age of 61, James Hogue was issued a citation. Wasn't arrested, but issued a citation in Aspen for stealing power from a parking garage, but using an extension cord. I mean, it's like the simplest, stupidest crime. He's got it run from a parking garage, an extension cord to like his car, and he's powering things in his car with. It's so stupid.
Yeah, I was almost envisioning, this is bad, but like the extension cord is like coming down the mountain all the way into the residencies. It's like one of these like 10,000 foot
Right.
or more extension cords, and he's like, I just need power.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past him. You just, again, I don't know how. I don't have an answer. We won't have an answer for why this guy can. It just seems like he can't help himself. Maybe there's a thrill to stealing and to creating these fake stories and seeing if you can, pull the wool over people's eyes or how far you can take it. Can you imagine if the guy would have applied himself and like went to the CIA or FBI or some, you know what I mean?
I think there's a couple little clues along the way, though. Like actually picking a name like J. Mitchell Huntsman tells us a little bit about him, right? He wants to be part of a crowd that's more sophisticated than the rest of us. He wants to hang out with people that are living a certain lifestyle, or he wants to fit in, and it can't just be how he looks, but also his name, his backstory, his prestige. And the fact that he just jumped around to only these places where, wealthy people or richer than us people live.
Yeah, Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Princeton,
Aspen,
Telluride,
yeah.
all high.
Yeah.
And I think he bounced around some other places. But those were, it seems, where he focused and spent time and set up shop,
Incredible.
Yeah, it is. I just, being accepted to Princeton off of a completely fake, made up story with a fake name, nothing about him real other than the fact that he was a good runner, and to get away with it and to be in prison while you're accepted and actually get them to defer your enrollment. It's remarkable, honestly. I mean, to be able to do that. I don't know if you could do it today.
Yeah, and he might be smart enough to get into Princeton. As ironic as that is,
Sure.
It's like with a 1410 or whatever the score was at the time, and his intellect, like he may not be traditionally, like maybe he's not the, maybe he is. I'm good at math. I'm good at all these things, but like he just didn't apply himself. He's one of these like wizard geniuses who didn't want to play by the rules, who just had different aspirations than, being a finance bro later on or something like that, right?
Yeah. He just obviously he made the choice of like that's his life, and that's the way he's going to live it.
Incredible.
Yeah. So that's it. I'm Sean. That's Jason. This is How It All Went South. We'll see you next time.